Welcome to the DIY Wealth Canada podcast, a show by independent investors for independent investors. Join hosts Bob and Nelson as they discuss investing, personal finance, and much more, all from a fiercely self-reliant Canadian perspective. As a reminder, nothing you're about to hear is investment advice. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode with DIY Wealth Canada podcast. I'm Bob. Along with me is my co-host, Nelson. Today, we're going to talk about things that we have learned for the past year. This is going to be a little bit of everything, personal finance, investing, a little bit of everything, I think. So we'll see where things take us. Nelson, are you excited about this?
Yeah, I am. One of the reasons why I do this podcast, anyway, not just to talk to Bob every week, which is one of the reasons I certainly do it, but for me, it's, we talk about stuff, we get our guests on here talking about stuff, and I get to share some of my knowledge with you guys, but I also get to learn as well. And I'm always looking to improve, whether it's the way I invest or the way I manage my personal finances. And having this ability to share ideas and talk about it has really helped me learn. And that's been invaluable for me. So that's why I kind of wanted to do this episode today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and it'll also hopefully going to let everyone know, hey, Bob and I, we might seem to have some answers, but we're still learning as well. So never feel bad about throwing out some beliefs you might have had or changing up your style or whatever. It's a journey at the end of the day, if you're not adjusting, then I would argue that you're not learning, and that's not a very good thing.
Yeah, I think one thing I've heard is if you're not busy learning, you're busy dying. So I truly believe that learning constantly is a good thing. And let's be honest here, we're not perfect at everything. So there's always rooms for improvement, and that's something I strive for every day. So yeah, let's just run through the idea. We're kind of reforming here a little bit. So I'll just mention one thing I learned, and Nelson, I'll pass it over to you. So one thing I learned this past year is the importance of sticking to your core investing strategy. I think given the AI boom and so on, it's very easy to abandon your investment strategy and jump on the hottest trend out there. And with the AI boom, things are very volatile. You could go up and down 5, 10, 15% each day. That's definitely high risk, right? So what I learned is obviously stick with the core investing strategy. For us would be hybrid investing, so holding individual dividend stocks and a few low-cost index ETFs. Use those as our core investing strategy. Now, if we decide to invest in so-called AI stocks or, higher risk stocks, we could still do that, but limit our risk. And the percentage, you kind of have to figure out yourself. I would argue probably stick to 5% or less, maybe at most 10% of your overall portfolio. So if things are volatile, you're not losing too much and you're not winning too much, right? So that's something I've learned. I seem to get reminded each year because each year there's always one of these hot stocks and everybody's chasing. A few years ago was cannabis, right? Some people make tons of money, some lost a lot of money. Yeah, so I think the important thing I learned this year, again, is to stick with your core investing strategy.
There's always going to be some strategy that's going to be working better than your strategy. And I think in the world of social media and in the age that we're in today, I've been reading a lot about social media and our happiness in a world where everybody's best life is on display, and financially on Twitter, because Twitter is the space for sharing financial information. TikTok, they all have active financial parts of those sites, but I think Twitter is the number one, or X. I always call it Twitter because I'm old. In a world where everybody seems to be getting richer faster than you, it's really hard to stay the course. I remember, I'm thinking back to the early parts of this decade where it was just the trashiest tech stocks that were going up, so quickly. And then like it was Bitcoin, and then, the boring dividend stocks that I like so much, and like say 2023, they were really underperforming as interest rates went up. And then it was whatever Mag 7, now it's the AI or the memory trade or whatever. And it's just, as people do very well over the short term on these trades, they get the most attention, and then they get a lot of the adulation of the market. Wow, look how good this guy's doing. And it's really hard to watch somebody get rich faster than you. Envy is, I think, the worst of these 7 deadly sins, partly because you can't have any fun. It's just all jealousy. Where, lust, you at least get to have some fun, and gluttony and so on. So I think that your lesson, Bob, is just super, super important, where it's like, hey, there's always going to be some shiny object. The grass is always going to be greener on someone else's side of the fence, because in finance, there's almost a limitless number of fences that you can kind of look over. But in finance, there's thousands and thousands of people sharing all the time. So basically, you put it all together, and it's just follow what you do best. And for me, that's dividend investing. And for you, Bob, it's that hybrid, some dividends, some ETFs, etc. And you're going to have periods where it looks like somebody has gotten wealthier quicker than you. But just keep in mind that these very quick gains can often be accompanied with even quicker losses, especially with the risk that it seems like people take nowadays. So that's gonna seg into one of the things that I learned, which is kind of what I talked about, where it's just don't take social media very seriously. We had an episode, maybe I'm gonna say like last year, even like it was closer to the beginning of the pod, about social media. And it was, for me, I struggled with, it wasn't necessarily like that everyone getting rich faster than me. Like I'm kind of beyond that. It was more just, you go on there to try to discuss things with everybody else, and you would just get a bunch of negative people who would say, hey, like, this is why this isn't going to work, or this is why this stock sucks, or you should invest in Bitcoin instead, or whatever. And it was just, I was struggling with that, just the negativity that I was seeing. And really what I did to help myself there is just really stop taking it so seriously. If somebody disagrees with me, okay, I'll probably just ignore the comment because I'm not interested in arguments. And sometimes I'll respond in a, kind of fun, a little bit of a snarky way, which isn't really, I don't mean it to be snarky. I really try not to be snarky. It's more of like a fun kind of thing. But anyways, that's the lesson that I've learned when it comes to social media. And it made it a lot easier for me to be on social media and have discussions with people and so on.
Yeah, I guess I'll add to that. One thing I've learned, maybe multiple things, but they're kind of all related, right? One would be really, it's very, very, very difficult not to compare yourself to other people. Nelson, you mentioned that, especially on social media, where, the World Simple has this little thing you could see how you're doing relatively to people in your age or age group and within Canada, right? And they rank you, you're like the top 2% or top 1% or top 5% of your age group within Canada, with your net worth or, your TFSA value. And it's kind of fun to see that, but at the same time, you're kind of comparing, and then you see people posting their progress with the actual value. For example, TFSA, you're like, oh, like they're, say, 10 years younger, but they have just as much as I do. You get into these comparisons, and it's super hard. So I think it's very, very important to stick with your own journey. Use other people as motivators, but don't compare yourself and feel bad about yourself, because ultimately it's your own personal journey, and everybody has different goals, right? I think I mentioned before, it's one thing to wanting to be the market performance, beating the index, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, you should be focusing on the goals you want to achieve in your life, the financial goals, right? So what if you're tracking the market or you're beating market or you're underperforming market a little bit. As long as you meet your financial goals, who cares if somebody is way better than you with having millions of dollars more than you? Like maybe their goal is to hit 50 million and maybe they will never hit that. Right. So that I think I learned that that's very, very important. And then the other thing I learned is really, and this is maybe not so much investing, personal finance related, but it kind of goes along that is really ignoring the noises. Yeah, just one thing, ignoring the market noises and such. But for me, I've learned there's so much noise in my life, right? Like we all have a smartphone, all the notifications, all these things. It's just, you're constantly checking your phones. You're not really putting your phone down and looking around and really enjoy that moment. So, I mean, I did this probably about 2 years now. When I got my phone, I turned off all the notification on my phones, right? Like the email notification, all the notification that I turn off automatically when I set up my phone. So I started doing that for a while. But about last year or a year and a half ago, I started turning off sounds from text, right? So SMS, text, WhatsApp messages, lines, whatever, right? Because I'm in a lot of groups. I have my scouts groups, I have my curling groups, I have my family groups, so on and so on. Every time somebody texts, it's like bing, bing, bing. And it's like I have a urge to grab my phone and check right away, even though I know it's not critical. So I consciously turn off the sound on my phone. I could still see the notification if I check, but because there's no sound, I found myself not checking the phones as often. And that has brought a lot of calmness to my life. And I learned that has actually improved the quality of my life. So that's something I've done. And I learned that's something it has helped me. So I will continue doing that moving forward.
That's a great story. And I'm going to expand on it because I've been actually thinking of a lot about this lately, like a lot. And actually, we're recording this on a Sunday. On Saturday, I went to a party. It was a friend's 65th birthday party. And I was joking to my wife, it was like Boomer Central, where I think there was about 30 boomers, and then the two of us who are millennials, and then so there's 4 millennials and then 2 kids. Anyway, the rest were boomers. And I was kind of like a little nervous about this party because I was like, oh man, like, I don't know. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was that these people were just in the moment. We were chatting, we were laughing, we were having a good time. And I don't think I saw somebody's phone come out once. And it was just so refreshing because I don't know about you, Bob, but when I hang out with my millennial friends and the people that are my own age, I see firsthand how addicted we are to our phones, how there's like a lull in the conversation and we're reaching for our phones to, like, I don't know, look at the latest thing on Instagram. And it's just taking away the notifications is a great step. I'm trying to do that same stuff where it's like I took Twitter off my phone and things like that to kind of avoid looking at it as often. But for me, it's just the importance of hanging out with people in person and that sort of recharge that you get from talking with someone. This pod is like I said earlier, like it's one of the reasons why I do this is because I get to talk to Bob every week, and you're a smart guy, and I enjoy talking to you. And it's great. Like this is a good substitute for in person, but it's not quite there. It's like 90% there. And for me, it's just that in person, non-family interaction with fellow humans, I've learned over the last year is really, really important to me. And I'm taking steps to maximize that as much as possible and as much as my friends' schedule will allow.
Another thing I've learned, I'm thinking is, like focusing on, we talk about investing, like this podcast is about the white wealth, right? Generating wealth, building wealth, and so on. But another important side of things would be really taking care of your personal health. I'm not getting younger anytime soon, so I've been focusing more and more on my personal health over the past year or so, right? So it's about, putting the time to go do some exercise, right? Go to the gym, go to the pool, go for a walk. I started regularly go for a walk at work when I'm in the office during lunchtime, just walk for 15 minutes or so, just get some fresh air. I regularly been going to the gym in the morning, usually work out for an hour to an hour and a half, weights and some cardio stuff. And that has really helped me in terms of my mental side of things, right? And especially working out in the morning, I find I'm more calm for the rest of the day. Now, some people feel better if they go work out in the afternoon or late at night. You kind of have to figure out what works for you. But for me, working out in the morning is good. Now, I can't say it's the most enjoyable thing to wake up at 5:45 in the morning to hit the gym at 6 a.m. just so I could get back and work around 8 or even earlier. But it feels really good. And people have been commenting that I look pretty good, lost some weight and such. So that's something I learned. I need to really focus more on that aspect and pay more attention to what I eat and so on.
It's funny how this episode has sort of taken this turn into some not so financial stuff. And I think we're going to pivot back to the financial stuff here in a minute. But, I'm on the same page as you. And I think where you've gotten to the point where I think both of us are very secure in kind of the way we invest, and the majority of our investment just sort of sit there and quietly compound. And you almost like need something to do while you're, and, in terms of like health, like I'm exactly with you. I've spent the last few months investing not as much in my physical health, but more in my mental health. And of course, we did an episode back in, January? Whatever it was, where I said that I was going back to work. And for the people who, kind of like hinted towards this on my newsletter and stuff, but for the people who, aren't really aware of what's going on, like I stopped working. And basically what happened was that I realized that mentally I was pretty messed up when it came to like my attitude towards work and some anxiety that was kind of around that. And I've, like, this is what I've been kind of focusing on now over the summer is working on that and reading and adjusting my attitude towards it because, like it wasn't healthy for me. So for me, that mental health I've invested in that, and, it's still a work in progress and everything. But Bob, like you're absolutely right. That is very important to, once you've got the kind of financial stuff figured out, it's like, hey, like, you've got to learn that other stuff. And the finance stuff gives you a back kind of a support for that stuff. So now I want to pivot it back to finance because we have gone a little bit off topic here. But one of the things that I've learned in terms of finance this year, and I talked to when we had Mike, the dividend guy, on, I told him that he was kind of the guy who sort of kicked me in the pants to sort of get me in this direction, was that my portfolio had a little bit too much yield and not quite enough growth. I had a few too many names in there that were just sort of, they paid big dividends and they weren't really doing anything besides paying that dividend. So for me, it was important to kind of realize that I didn't have enough growth. And I've taken steps in the last, call it 2 years, not necessarily like just this year, but to add to the kind of the growthier part of my portfolio and take a little bit of the income away by doing that. So basically I make a little bit less income today, but the growth is higher. In like the end of 22, I was sort of at a 4 to 5% dividend growth rate. And now I'm probably closer to like a 6 to 7%. So just a slow kind of move in a little bit more of a growthier direction there. Bob, I don't know if I've asked you this before, but do you track your like kind of anticipated dividend growth from just the stocks you own, or am I the only one who does that?
Oh, we track for sure. We kind of track our expected dividend income for the year after. But right now we're still injecting quite a bit of fresh capital and so on. So the growth is not entirely coming from organic dividend growth. We turned most of our drips off back in late April. So now what's fueling the dividend income growth would be coming from fresh capital and organic dividend growth. Now, fresh capital will probably start to decline over the next few years. So yeah, it's important to rely on dividend growth. So I do have a tracker in my spreadsheet, and I could look at how much we're getting out from organic dividend growth versus drip and so on. So yeah, I do track that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important to have some numbers, right? So that's very important. Now, again, focusing more on the investing personal finance side, as we kind of went off tangent a little bit. I think one thing I learned is to figure out how to reduce number of holdings. We have something like 45 or even 50 dividend stocks, individual dividend stocks, many, many years ago. I've been trimming. Earlier this year, we were at, I think, just under 40. I think now we're down to 5 or so. Sometimes it's really hard to trim. I certainly have had issues figuring out which stock to trim and such. What I learned is it's okay to let go these smaller holdings, right? So quite recently, we closed out Walmart. We held Walmart for a very, very long time. And unfortunately, it's a relatively small position. And we ended up selling it or closing it earlier this month. And I think that was a 5-bagger or something, not including dividends. So we did really well. But it was like less than 1% of our portfolio. So it takes too much time to track these smaller positions. And ultimately, the bigger positions are the one that make a huge difference in our portfolio nowadays anyways, right? So what I learned is it's okay to let go of these smaller positions unless you're going to add more to these smaller positions. So for example, if you started a position in Apple, and even though it's relatively small to your overall portfolio, but if you're planning to add more to Apple, then yeah, continue adding. But say you have, I don't know, Coca-Cola or even another stock that it's relatively small, so less than 1% of your portfolio, and you're not planning to add more, but that stock has done really well, it's okay to close it out and reinvest the money elsewhere.
This is such a great topic because it's exactly what I've been thinking about for the last year. I, at one point, owned more than 100 different stocks, and I know a lot of you listening are going to be like, and yeah, it was too many. My view was that I was creating my own sort of ETF. I wanted to take a lot of positions and then let the winners kind of concentrate over time, just like the S&P 500 or the TSX Composite or whatever would do. And I also thought that kind of, wrongly, that more more positions would give me more secure dividend income. So it's like, if I have dividend income from 100 different sources versus 50 different sources, then that would be twice as secure as the alternative. But what I found was that it wasn't, and that I really just owned a lot of crap, for lack of a better term. I had some just not very good companies in there. I would just throw a little bit of money at something, like there's just all these behaviors that looking back on it were not the smartest of moves that I have done. So anyway, I'm down from over 100. I'm down to about 85 positions today. And the plan is over the next, call it 1 to 2 years, to sort of get into that 40 to 50 position range. I've actually have like 3 stocks right now that are in the midst of being acquired. So those will go away very easily once those things happen. For me, it was like, Bob, I liked your comment about how you were talking, you got to find each position, you have to identify each one, you have to say, hey, like, am I going to keep this a small position? Do I like it enough to add to it? And then, if you like it enough to add to it, then it kind of becomes a core position. And if you don't like it enough to add to it, then it's probably just time to rip the Band-Aid off. I'm trying to be patient, and I'm trying to wait until some of these stocks that I don't like as much will maybe get closer to like 52-week highs or whatever. I've realized that you guys know that my style is very boring. I own a lot of really boring old school dividend stocks, and some of the names that I bought, I just sort of bought for the, like, I was attracted to the growth or the cyclicality or like the kind of the capital gains potential. And I realized that they're not consistent with my overall goals. My overall goal is to just live on the dividends, get a little bit of, a increase every year, and don't worry as much about the capital gains. Know that they'll happen, but not worry as much about them. So that's what I've learned in the last year. And that's something that I'm moving towards over time. I suspect, like, if we have another discussion a year from now, it might be at kind of that, hopefully like 50 to 60 position. So I'm usually a very long-term buy and hold guy, and there will be some stocks that I've held for a long time that I'll kick out, but it's too many. So it was time to do that. And that's the plan.
Yeah, I think we're both learning along the way here, right? In terms of how many positions we hold and actively trying to trim them. Another thing I learned, and maybe this is not just this past year, but overall, as I learning more and more, I think it's important we talk about these whole social media and so on, right? But for me, I think it's important to learn from people that may have different views as myself. So for example, learning why do people only invest in index, or why people invest in covered call ETFs. Learn the reasons behind those. You may not agree with them, but at least learn, and being able to logically figure out why that's not the way to invest for yourself. It may work for those people, but you kind of have to think differently, right? So why is this important? Why have I learned this? Because if we only consume materials and listen to people that 100% agree with our investing logic and strategy, you're going to be really limiting yourself in terms of your investment knowledge and growth. The only way to learn more is to jump to the other side, call it the dark side or whatever, and understand how other people are thinking about. Do not engage into heated online debates with them and such, because that will be better for your mental health. But understand the way why they think these are good investment, right? And then being able to use that and just like, hey, that's not right because A, B, C, D, E. Or you could learn a few things from them, right? And then apply those things to your own investment journey or strategy. So that's something I learned. I may not agree 100% with some, financial advisors and such, or, how to withdraw RSP versus TFSA or non-taxable accounts, or non-registered account. But by learning what they're thinking, I could kind of model my own method or tweak my methods by learning what they're doing. So I think that's what I learned this past year.
There's a Charlie Munger quote about how in order to properly debunk your enemy's position, and I'm paraphrasing, this is the exact quote, in order to debunk your enemy's position, you have to understand that position better than they do. And you're right, Bob. I think that's incredibly important. And one thing that I did just recently on my newsletter is I kind of deconstructed those covered call funds. And you guys know that at this point, I'm no fan of those covered call funds for a few different reasons. But I really went into it and I'm like, okay, let me put myself into the shoes of somebody who is thinking of investing in this and wants that yield. What would I want to know? And basically what I did is I went in and it's like, hey, this is they use the leverage and et cetera, and the covered calls and then this is like kind of where that yield comes from. And so it's like, hey, like, what point would I be okay with this? And it's like, well, there are a few situations where I can look and I can say, okay, like, for instance, if I'm not very interested in finance, then perhaps I might add something like that as a bit of a increase my income in terms of my retirement. So, it's like, I don't agree with it, but I can see what's happening there. And that kind of brings me to the next point, which is, for me, one of the things I learned this year is that I was spending too much time on, whether it was social media or whatever, just kind of like reading about investing, like a very meta kind of, this is what you look for, whatever, et cetera. And I focused more on just looking at annual reports, looking at investor presentations, looking at companies individually to try to find ideas and trying to spend an hour or two, not every day, but almost every day, just looking at fresh companies that I had never seen before. And as the TSX has gone up and up and up over the last year, I found myself looking more and more at companies outside of Canada, just from the kind of the valuation perspective. There's not a lot of cheap stocks in Canada anymore, but there are ones around the world. So just for me, doing the actual work, looking at the filings, running stock screeners, which I had somewhat abandoned over, call it like the 5 years prior, just looking for new ideas and just exercising those muscles. For me, I know a lot of the TSX stocks so well that it's like, I'm not interested in researching Royal Bank at a 52-week at an all-time high because, one, I know the company very well, and two, it's like I'm not interested in buying it at that level. So I want to have this knowledge that compounds behind the scenes for me, and that was kind of the best way that I thought to go about it. So just, it's almost like, Bob, you talked about the gym. It's the boring kind of reps of learning about more companies. And then hopefully at some point in the future, that knowledge sticks and you can either apply it to, say, different companies, or you're familiar with that company. And then when it gets to the point where it's like, hey, I'm interested in buying this, it's at the valuation that I want, I don't have to do as much work to get up to speed.
Yeah, you said it there. I think you mentioned the word boring. That's definitely something I learned this past year. Is boring is good when it comes to personal finance and investing. I mean, one thing I learned, and again, it seems to validate itself every single year, is keep it to the simple stuff. The boring stuff is the important part, right? What do I mean by that? The boring stuff, how to increase your income. How do you grow your savings gap? So I'll say for those that don't know what I mean by savings gap, is how much you earn minus how much you spend. That's the savings gap, right? The more you could increase your savings gap means that there's more money you could invest in your portfolio, or, put that money aside for savings and such, right? So that savings gap is very, very important to grow your future net worth. And then it's really about sticking to your core investment strategy that I talked about, and just control things that you could control, right? I think many people worry about where the market is going and such. The reality is you can't control what the market will do. The market could go up 10% today, down 10% tomorrow, but over the long term, it should go up. Yes, we will hit bear market, we'll hit bull market, so on and so on. But if you look at the historical data, the tendency is to go up roughly 8%, 8 to 10% each year over a very long term. So don't stress out about how the market is doing. Don't stress out about what you can control. Control what you can, right? Control things like how much you can earn, how much you're spending, what you're investing with your money, and so on. And really keep it boring and stupid. And I keep referring to this as like, if you could explain to a 5-year-old how you're growing your money or your net worth, that's the important part. If you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, that means you should simplify your strategy. I think simplification is so important, especially nowadays with all these complicated investment methods you could do, or, ETFs and such. So that's something I learned. Simplification, keeping it boring, let your net worth grow, investment portfolio net worth grow slowly over time. We check our net worth every quarter, and the market has been doing really, really, really well the last little while, but every time I check, I'm like, what? We our net worth grew that much from a dollar amount and also from a percentage. It just mind-boggling. And we've been doing this for a long time, and it's just like the last few years just compounding itself so much. I'm literally falling off my chair every single time. So that's something I really, really learned is like keep it simple and just control the stuff you could control. Do not worry about things outside your control because you'll just be losing sleep every night.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'm going to add to it. Sort of, it's related, but it's a little different. Where for me, it's like that simplicity. Obviously, all that stuff is important. For me, it's come down to maybe in the last few years, not necessarily that's the last year, but I think I understand it a little bit better over the last year, which is just embracing where I am as an investor, embracing the fact that I'm less risk happy what I used to be, and just sort of realizing that I'm at a different stage of my life than what I was before. And that means being much more cautious with my money and not necessarily the portfolio, even though I talked about how I'm getting rid of some of the friskier stuff that was in there because it was obviously that it was a wrong decision on my part. But in terms of just things like when I was younger, 10 years ago, when I was pushed towards financial independence, I didn't have an emergency fund. I was happy with a credit card with a 5-figure limit on it, and I would just throw whatever I needed on the credit card. If there was an actual emergency, would sell an investment or do whatever to pay it off. And now that kind of terrifies me a little bit. And now I've got to the point where I have 6 to 12 months worth of spending on hand at any point in time. It's actually closer to 12 months. It's usually right around 12 months. I've kind of given myself a rule where it's like if the market is down, I will take some of that spending and I'll invest it and then kind of let the dividends slowly bring that back up to the 12 months worth of spending. But just that lack of risk, I'm just not that comfortable taking very much risk anymore in my old age, and just embracing that from like my own perspective. It's like, hey, I'm not that young anymore. My goals are different than what they used to be, and acting accordingly rather than looking at, say, the way that younger Nelson would have acted or what somebody on social media might be doing, or even like what Bob might be doing or any of the other people we've had on the pod. It's like my journey is my journey. It's nobody else's journey.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Well, I think we're right against time here. So I'll just mention one last thing I learned the past year, and I'll pass it over to Nelson to close out. So one last thing I learned this past year is it's okay to spend money, right? It's like I'm a saver, but I've learned over the years, and especially this year, it's okay to spend money to add some memories into your life, right? And this kind of goes to this book by Bill Perkins, Die with Zero. It's a great book. You haven't read it. Now, I don't 100% agree with everything he mentioned, but what's important out of that book is this whole memory dividend, right? So the idea of creating memories at different points of your life. When you're 70, you're not going to be able to climb, like some big mountains. Maybe you can, but like most of us probably will have some difficulties, or you probably wouldn't feel the same going on a 14-hour flight compared to when you're younger. So, really take the time to build memories, and it's okay to spend money, right? So like go on these trips with your family, because when you're traveling to like different parts of the world with your family now versus 20 years from today, it's going to be different experience, right? If you're young kids traveling with them when they're young versus when they're adults, it's completely different. So really, it's okay to spend that money. You don't have to like wait till you retire. I know we're all trying to reach our retirement, but it's okay to enjoy that moment along the way. So that's something I've learned.
That is such a great topic to end it on, because that's what it all comes down to at the end of the day, where it's like, what are we doing all this for? It's to have security for our families, yes, but it's to have happiness for our families. And we realize that if we can delay consumption for a little while, then that consumption or that capital grows, and it can fund more and more and more consumption in the future. But of course, the issue with that and the $1 million question is, at what point do you consume and what point do you save? And that answer is going to be different for everybody. It's going to be even different for like you and me. But I know that when I, retired in at the end of 2022, the biggest thing I struggled with was turning my attitude from saving to spending. And I really struggled with it for a few years. I still struggle with it. Like, I do not spend as much as what I probably could or should. And one thing I've done to help improve on that, and maybe that'll help some of you guys, maybe it won't, I don't know. But for me, it was, I created categories of spending. And so those categories are things like travel. And, you guys know I like to golf, time with friends, time with family, etc. Going out to restaurants where it's like, I give myself permission to spend whatever I want on those categories. And that doesn't mean like going out to restaurants every night or going on trips, every week or whatever. But it's like, just when I do these things, I've given myself permission to like, hey, don't worry about the cost, because I know that part of my brain is always going to worry about the cost. But I'm trying to trick it into not caring as much. And so I'll do things like, like I mostly sit in the front of the plane now. I look at a little bit nicer hotels and so on. So those are like kind of the things that I've done to sort of trick myself in order to spend on the things that I value. And at the same time, try to save money on the things that I don't necessarily value as much. So like my car insurance, like I don't care who insures my car. I just want the cheapest coverage that gives me something reasonable. So that was kind of one of the things that I've done there to try to help that. But Bob, it's such a really good point. And these tricks at the end of the day are me trying to give myself permission to spend more money and to move myself more into the spending part of the spending versus saving equation. It's a really important point. And I'm telling you guys that I think most people listening will struggle with that as they transition from working into retirement. But anyway, we're out of time. Bob, any last comments before we let everyone, I assume they're listening on their way to work, so let them go to work.
Yeah, no, I think that this was a good discussion, and we could probably talk for more, but maybe we'll talk more. Maybe we should make this a reoccurring topic once in a while. So yeah, it's been good talking about it.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, guys, this is our second to last episode until our season finale. That's going to be right around the end of June. We're going to do a live episode on Twitter, so keep an eye on our social media feeds. I'm at, of course, CDI Newsletter. If you don't already follow me, Bob is at Talkan, and we will give you guys some more information on that. We'll let you guys ask some questions live. We'll have some fun with it, and it should be really good. And then we'll take the summer off and be back in September with maybe video, Bob?
Yeah, we've been talking about maybe we'll do video. We'll kind of experiment a little bit for season 2. So if you have any feedback, let us know. Always looking for ways we can improve. And, if you have any topics, let us know. Yeah, on Twitter, we'll record it, and then we'll do some light editing and put them on the different hosting platforms so you can listen as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon, either live or on your Spotify's or whatever. Take care.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe to never miss another episode. For more from Bob, visit his site at tawcan.com. That's TAWCAN, all one word. Nelson can be found at CanadianDividendInvesting.com. They're both on Twitter as well. Just search for Talkan or CDI Newsletter. Thanks. See you next time.